In a small, bustling village nestled between rolling hills and fertile plains, there lived a cunning and wealthy landlord named Richard Hale. Richard was known throughout the region for his sharp business acumen, impressive estate, and unfortunately, his complete lack of compassion for the hard-working farmers who toiled on his lands. His wealth hadn't come from his own labor or innovation, but rather from the sweat and struggle of others. Richard's terms were notoriously ruthless, carefully crafted to ensure that no matter how hard the farmers worked, the lion's share of profit would flow straight into his already overflowing coffers. One crisp autumn evening, Richard sat in his grand estate, surrounded by luxurious furnishings that stood in stark contrast to the humble dwellings of those who worked his lands. Beside him stood his loyal but simple-minded servant, Martin, who had served the Hale family for decades. "These poor farmers," Richard sneered, swirling a goblet of expensive wine in his hand as he gazed out at the fields that stretched beyond his windows. "They break their backs from dawn till dusk, yet they barely have enough to feed their families. Meanwhile, I sit here in comfort, my warehouses overflowing with their harvest." Martin, always eager to please his master, chuckled obediently. "You're the smartest man in this village, sir. No one would dare challenge your methods or your authority." Just as these words left Martin's lips, there came a knock at the door. A poor but hard-working farmer named Ethan Carter had arrived, hat in hand, bowing humbly before the landlord. Ethan was in his late 40s, his face weathered by years under the sun, his hands calloused from decades of toil, but his spirit remained unbroken despite the hardships he had endured. "Lord Hale," Ethan said, his voice steady despite his nervousness, "I've heard you lease land for farming. My family and I have fallen on hard times, and I would like to rent a piece for the coming season." Richard's lips curled into a sly smile as he assessed the desperate farmer before him. Another opportunity had just presented itself. "Of course, Ethan. I'm always willing to help those in need, but there are conditions to my generosity. You will work the land for a year, and when the harvest is ready, half of it will belong to me. That's my standard arrangement." Ethan, though well aware of the landlord's reputation for greed, had no other choice if he wanted to provide for his family. He agreed, grateful for the opportunity, despite the unfair terms. For months, he worked tirelessly, rising before dawn and working until his body ached, nurturing the fields with dedication and expertise passed down through generations. When the time came, the golden crop stood tall and proud, a testament to his hard work and agricultural knowledge. As expected, Richard arrived with Martin in tow, ready to collect his share. "Ah, Ethan," he said, surveying the abundant fields with greedy eyes. "Looks like you've done well this season. Now, as per our agreement, half of this harvest is mine." Ethan sighed but nodded respectfully, watching helplessly as Richard took not just half, but the best portion of the crops, leaving only the damaged remnants behind. That evening, Ethan sat at his small wooden table in his modest home, staring at the meager grains left for his family. His son, Daniel, a sharp-witted young man in his early 20s who had recently returned from studying in the city, saw his father's distress. "Father, why do you look so troubled?" Daniel asked, placing a comforting hand on Ethan's shoulder. Ethan shook his head, his eyes reflecting years of resignation. "This is our fate, son. Men like Richard Hale take advantage of people like us. We work ourselves to the bone, and they reap the rewards. It has always been this way." Daniel's eyes gleamed with determination and a hint of mischief. "Not anymore, father. Leave it to me. I've learned a thing or two during my time away." The next day, Daniel approached Richard's estate with confidence in his stride. "Lord Hale," he said when granted an audience, "I would like to lease your land this year." Richard smirked, amused by the young man's boldness. "You think you're cleverer than your father, boy? Fine. But here's the deal: you can keep whatever grows beneath the soil, and I will take whatever grows above it. Those are my terms." Daniel smiled knowingly, already formulating his plan. "Agreed, sir. Your terms are acceptable." That season, instead of wheat or corn like most farmers would plant, Daniel planted potatoes. He tended the crop with the same dedication as his father, but with a strategic purpose in mind. When the harvest arrived, Richard and Martin came eagerly to collect their share, anticipating another bountiful haul. "Well, Daniel," Richard said, rubbing his hands together in anticipation, "time for me to collect my share of the harvest." "Of course, Lord Hale," Daniel said calmly, gesturing to the field. "You asked for what grows above the soil, so please, take the potato leaves and stems." Richard's smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of shock and then anger. "What? You planted potatoes?" Daniel nodded, maintaining his composure. "Yes, sir. As you can see, the valuable part, the potatoes themselves, grows underground. And as per our agreement, that belongs to me." Richard fumed as Daniel walked away, carrying baskets full of plump, nutritious potatoes, leaving behind nothing but useless leaves and stems for the landlord. Martin gasped, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Master, the boy tricked you," he exclaimed, stating the obvious. Richard clenched his jaw, his face reddening with anger and embarrassment. "We'll see about that. Next season, I'll make sure to outsmart him. No farmer's son is going to get the better of Richard Hale." The following spring, Daniel returned to Richard's estate. "Lord Hale, I'd like to lease the land again for this growing season." Richard grinned, confident that he had learned from his mistake. "Fine, but this time I will take what grows beneath the soil, and you can keep what grows above it. Let's see how clever you are now." Daniel agreed without hesitation, his calm demeanor betraying nothing of his plans. That season, he planted wheat, working diligently to ensure a healthy crop. The field soon became a sea of golden stalks, swaying in the breeze. When the crops ripened, Richard arrived, confident he had won this round of wits. "Daniel, it's time to collect my share. I hope you've prepared it for me." Daniel bowed slightly, maintaining his respectful manner. "As per our agreement, you may take what's beneath the soil, the roots of the wheat." Richard's face paled as realization dawned on him. You planted wheat." Daniel nodded, gesturing to the golden grains ready for harvest. "Yes, Lord Hale. The roots are yours to collect, but the golden grains above belong to me." Richard clenched his fists in frustration as Daniel and his helpers began harvesting the valuable wheat. Martin shook his head in disbelief. "Master, we've been tricked again. The boy is too clever." Determined not to be fooled a third time, Richard thought carefully before making his next offer. "Next time, I will take both the top and bottom parts of the crop. You will only keep what grows in the middle. There's no way you can outsmart me now." Daniel merely smiled, accepting the challenge with a respectful nod. The next season, he planted sugarcane. The tall stalks grew strong and healthy under his careful tending. When the crop was ready, Richard arrived with a smug grin, certain that his terms would guarantee him the valuable portion this time. "Now, Daniel, let's see you outsmart me this time," he said confidently. Daniel gestured to the field of tall sugarcane. "Take the roots and the top leaves, Lord Hale." As we agreed. Richard's face fell as Daniel and his workers began slicing the sweet, juicy stalks from the middle of the plants and carrying them home. The valuable sugar-rich portions were all in the middle, leaving Richard with nothing but roots and leaves once again. Martin gawked in shock. "Master, he's done it again. He's outsmarted you for the third time." Richard's shoulders sagged in defeat. He sat down on a nearby stump, shaking his head in disbelief. "This boy, he has taught me a lesson I won't soon forget." Daniel approached the landlord with a calm, respectful tone. "Lord Hale, farmers work hard to feed not just themselves, but everyone in the village, including you. They deserve respect and fair rewards for their labor. Exploiting their need and taking advantage of their hard work is not only unfair, but ultimately harms the entire community." Richard sighed deeply, looking out over the fields that had been worked by generations of farmers. For the first time, he saw not just land and crops, but the human effort and dignity behind them. "You're right, Daniel. I have been unfair for too long, thinking only of my own wealth and not of the welfare of those who create it." The next day, Richard gathered all the farmers from the surrounding area and made a surprising announcement. He would return the lands he had unfairly taken over the years and promised to pay fair wages for their work. He established new terms that would allow both landlord and farmer to prosper together. From that day forward, the village prospered as never before. The farmers worked with renewed vigor, knowing their efforts would be fairly rewarded. Daniel became a hero among them, not just for his cleverness in outsmarting the greedy landlord, but for restoring their dignity and fair treatment. And Richard, having learned his valuable lesson, became a respected and just landlord, finding that his wealth actually increased when those who worked for him were treated with fairness and respect. Years later, when asked about his clever strategy, Daniel would simply smile and say, "True wisdom isn't about taking advantage of others, but finding solutions where everyone can benefit. Sometimes the cleverest thing you can do is to show others a better way forward." The story of Daniel and Richard spread throughout the region, serving as a reminder that intelligence and fairness will ultimately triumph over greed and exploitation. It became a favorite tale, told around evening fires, teaching children the value of clever thinking, standing up for what's right, and the importance of treating others with dignity and respect. This tale reminds us that no matter how powerful or wealthy someone might be, true justice has a way of prevailing through wisdom and perseverance. Daniel's strategic thinking demonstrates that sometimes the most effective way to change an unjust system is not through direct confrontation, but through cleverly working within its rules to expose its flaws. The story also highlights the transformative power of understanding. Richard's change of heart came not just from being outsmarted, but from finally seeing the humanity in those he had exploited. It shows that even those who have done wrong can learn, grow, and become better when shown a different perspective. For generations, this story has inspired those facing seemingly insurmountable odds against powerful adversaries. It teaches that with patience, intelligence, and strategic thinking, even the most entrenched systems of inequality can be challenged and transformed. The clever farmer's triumph wasn't just in outsmarting the landlord 3 times, but in ultimately creating a more just and prosperous community for everyone. In our own lives, we may encounter situations where others hold power over us unfairly. The lesson of Daniel and Richard reminds us that sometimes the path to change isn't through force or confrontation, but through understanding the rules of the game and finding creative ways to turn them toward justice. It's a reminder that true victory isn't just in winning for ourselves, but in creating systems where everyone can thrive. As we reflect on this timeless tale, we might ask ourselves, where in our own lives might we need to think more creatively about challenges? Where might we be like Richard, failing to see the humanity in others? And where might we have the opportunity, like Daniel, to use our intelligence not just for personal gain, but to create more fairness and dignity for all? The clever farmer's triumph wasn't just a victory of wit over power, it was a triumph of justice over exploitation, of community over selfishness, and ultimately of humanity's better nature over its worst impulses. And that is a lesson worth remembering in every age and every circumstance.